Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. And I'm really excited for today's virtual field trip. We are at the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk, Virginia, and we are going to meet some awesome amphibians. So during the course of this adventure today, we are going to learn why they're such a unique group in the animal kingdom. We'll learn about some of their traits and, of course, some of their adaptations that allow them to survive in some pretty cool environments. I'm really excited to introduce Stephanie and Jess, who will be joining us today and sharing some new friends with us. And then, of course, we're going to have some time to do a little bit of Q&A. So Stephanie, Jess, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
No problem. Hello.
All right. Well, I know that the Virginia Zoo has some really cool amphibians, and we'd love to meet some of them. We'd love to learn about some of their traits. And yeah, then we'll let the students take over with their questions.
Okay. All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Jess. That was Stephanie. We do have some pretty awesome amphibians for you to meet today. Stephanie actually just went to get our first one. But first, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to what makes an amphibian an amphibian. So that's a pretty big word for some of my younger groups. I know we do have some younger groups here. So amphibian or bean, if it's easier to remember it that way. An amphibian is an animal that spends part of its life in the water as a baby, and then as it becomes an adult, it moves on land or has the ability to go onto land most of the time. So amphibian, the word means dual life or two lives. Amphibians start off as a little egg, and that egg has to be laid in the water because it does not have an eggshell. And then when that egg hatches, you might see a tadpole or some other little larva swimming around. You may have seen tadpoles in a pond or a lake. Those tadpoles then have to go through something called metamorphosis to turn into an adult. So all amphibians have those traits in common. They also have really, really special skin. You might have seen that Stephanie had some purple gloves on. I'll be wearing them also a little bit later. We have to wear gloves when we handle our amphibians because their skin is able to take in air and nutrients from the world around them. So when they live in a pond or a lake, depending on how clean or healthy that lake is, they could have a really, really great time. Or if the lake is really dirty and polluted, they're probably not going to want to live there anymore because they can absorb all of that stuff from the water. No problems. We just dropped something. From the water into their bodies. So that's why we don't want to touch them with our hands, which could have lotion or Germ-X or dirt from outside because we're at the zoo and who knows what's going on. So even though all amphibians have these things in common, they are very, very different. There are salamanders, frogs, toads, and another group called caecilians, which we're not going to meet today. But we are going to meet the first three, and Stephanie has got our first one. She's going to talk to you a little bit about salamanders to start us off.
All right, guys. So I have our first friend is a salamander. Her name is Beaker. She's actually called a tiger salamander because they do have kind of tiger stripes on their back. So you can kind of see those stripes that she has. Now, salamanders actually encompass about 500 species of amphibians out there. So our salamanders are typically going to look a lot like this. They're going to have that long body. They're also going to have short little stubby legs and then a long tail. So salamanders can be found pretty much throughout the United States, and we actually have more salamanders in the North Americas than any other country in the world. So they are typically a species that's going to be found here. These guys here are typically going to be carnivores. They're going to eat little snails and slugs and anything that they can find outside in their environment. They will live mostly on land, but some salamanders will transition and be more in water. And then there are a couple that are actually going to be found completely on land. Our little salamander friend here is actually one of the larger salamanders, but they can have two species of salamanders actually get up to 5 feet in length, so they can get much larger. However, most of them are going to be this big or a little bit smaller. We have some spotted salamanders here in Virginia. We also have some marbled salamanders, so those are all different little guys that we have. Now, salamanders are going to be typically found kind of near moist water areas. They're going to be found near some ground they can dig into. They definitely like to dig and burrow. And you actually can't see them a lot because in the daytime or when it's warmer, they're going to be completely underground, and they can also stay underground for several weeks at a time where they don't need to come up for food. So during the really harsh environments, if it's really hot in the summer or really cold in the winter, they're going to be completely buried and they're going to stay right down there. So our little tiger salamander here is going to be found right here across the coastline as well as throughout North America. And she's mostly going to be eating invertebrates or other insects. So she's going to eat different types of things, lots of worms and slugs. So her main job is going to be to control all of those bug populations and help us to keep those down. So we are going to meet a different type of animal. So our salamander is one of our types of amphibians. So next we are actually going to show you a different type of frog. So we're going to take Miss Beaker back and let her have a chance to hang out, and you'll get to see one of our frog friends.
All right, you guys. So this is a frog, like Miss Stephanie said. Let me let you get a really good look at his cute little face. So this is Humpty Dumpty. He is a White's tree frog. White's tree frogs are found in Australia and Papua New Guinea, which is a little bit north of Australia. They are unique even among frogs because they have very, very thick skin, which some scientists think they can use to control how much water leaves their body. So remember we said that frogs and salamanders and toads have that unique adaptation to absorb things through their skin. And sometimes that means they can't always control what comes in and what goes out. But White's tree frogs have developed this adaptation to be able to retain water more easily because they live in areas that go through very distinct dry and wet seasons. We're going to let him climb. Hold on. So he is a White's tree frog, so he does like to climb, although he is trying to hide his face right now. I'm not sure what that's about. He's getting camera shy. So frogs are different from salamanders, obviously. They're different in more ways than just the way that they look, but that's going to be the main difference. So frogs have these sticky feet, some of them that they can use to stick to things. They've also got those, oh goodness. Hold on one second. Where are you trying to go? Oh, it is great. Are you good? They've also got those really strong legs that salamanders do not have that they can use to leap. If you've ever played leapfrog, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Frogs are also very unique because they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. So a lot of times salamanders, they're going to differ with how big they are, but their basic body shape is roughly the same. Frogs can look like Humpty Dumpty here, where they're very small and kind of spindly, climbing all over the place. They can also be kind of short and stout and a little fat. They can be really, really tiny, like a dart frog, and they can even be huge, like a bullfrog. So I'm actually going to put him in his little clear container that we transport him in, and you guys are going to get a better look at him. Give me 1 second. Oh, don't climb up me. Gosh, there he goes. Technical difficulties. So hopefully the glare's not too bad. There we go. And now you guys can see him moving around with those sticky feet on his toe pads. That helps him climb trees and leaves and other things in his natural habitat. So I said that frogs are pretty unique, but they do look a lot like toads. And honestly, there's not a lot of differences between frogs and toads, but there are a couple. Frogs actually have small teeth-like things in their mouth called odontoids, and that is the main way that we tell the difference. Some people say that there are other differences in their bone structure and their habits, but as of right now, the only solid difference that we have are those tiny little teeth that frogs have in their mouths. Toads do not have those teeth. They just have gums. They don't even have dentures that they can use. So I think Stephanie is actually going to bring out an example. Oh my goodness, look at that. An example of a toad, but you guys can see Humpty Dumpty's amazing adaptation kind of crawling all over the ground here. He's called Humpty Dumpty because he's kind of got a fat belly like Humpty Dumpty. All right, I'm going to let Stephanie take over.
All right, guys, so this is a cane toad. So these guys are a little bit different than a frog. Our cane toad here is named Naveen. We also have a Tiana in our collection as well. We do like our Disney names. So Naveen here is what's called a cane toad. So these type of toads have a little bit drier skin. They're not usually going to be found strictly in the water. Toads typically are going to be found more on land, and they're going to have that kind of dry skin versus the real slimy skin that the frogs do. Like Jess said, they do not have those teeth in their mouth. But you can look at the different adaptations in their feet. So I'm going to bring him up a little bit closer. So his feet are not really made more for swimming. His feet are made more to kind of dig through the dirt. They're typically going to burrow themselves in the dirt. Now, they are normally going to be found around Texas into South America, but our cane toads here have actually been introduced into some other areas. Now, they brought them into parts of Australia because they wanted them to eat a type of insect that was found there that was kind of a pest. But now our cane toad has become what's called an invasive species. So that means that he is not normally found in that space, but he is now in that area. And because he has no natural predators, they're actually starting to take over. So cane toads can eat anything that they can fit in their mouth. So he's going to eat insects, he's going to eat small mice. They might eat any kind of large flying insects as well. So anything that they fit in their mouth, and then they don't have any natural predators. So there is nobody there that is going to eat him because he is not from that area. Something else that they have these little sacs on the back of their back here, these right here, and those are actually little poison sacs. So what he can do is release a toxic secretion from those, which is a bufotoxin. So it's something that's actually going to kill any type of predator that's going to eat them. So unfortunately, they're kind of taking over the space. And now, because they don't have any natural predators and they have those toxic secretions, that is something that is giving them the ability to thrive and survive, but is unfortunately not good for the native species that are there. Now, our cane toads here are typically going to dig around in the dirt. They're going to kind of burrow themselves down. You can tell that they have a lot of different coloring to them, so I'm going to kind of show you his back here. So he has some browns and some greens. So typically all you're going to see sticking up are those little eyes sticking out. He's usually going to be mostly down below, and then you're just going to see his eyes because he's what's called an ambush predator. So what he is going to do is he's going to wait underneath the dirt, and no one's going to be able to see him. And then he's going to jump out and grab his food. So he's going to ambush that. You might see his little throat moving a little here. He's actually vocalizing. So they do have different vocalizations that they will make. You probably can't hear it on the video, but you can probably see his throat moving. And those vocalizations are going to be different calls that they're either going to call to other toads that are near them, or they're also going to call maybe to ward off or scare off something. So with him, he's not a really big jumper, so he's not going to jump really big distances like a bullfrog might. But what he's going to do is kind of do some small little leaps and hops. So our next amphibian friend looks a lot like our cane toad. So we're going to show you him next and learn a little bit more about his coloring.
Okay, so like Stephanie said, this is an animal that looks a lot like, oh, let me actually make it so you can see him. He looks a lot like a toad, but he's actually a frog. He is an ornate horned frog or a Pac-Man frog. His name is Atari. And the reason that he is a frog and not a toad is because he does have those odontode projections that frogs have in their mouths. So Atari here, he's got those tiny little teeth-like things in his mouth that help him to grip his food and eat it. He's called a Pac-Man frog because I don't know if you guys are old enough to play Pac-Man or if you've heard of it, but Pac-Man is a little guy that eats pretty much everything in its path, and Atari here is a little guy who eats pretty much everything in its path. He's going to try to eat bugs, small mammals, birds, other frogs, other horned frogs. He's going to eat pretty much anything he can fit in his mouth, and sometimes he's going to try to eat things that can't fit in his mouth. So he's got eyes bigger than his stomach, as we say, and he does have some pretty small eyes. So one thing that we do want to talk about, and Miss Stephanie's going to bring out another friend here in a second. Frogs and toads and salamanders don't have a whole lot in the way of defense. They don't have sharp claws usually. They have those little teeth if they're frogs, but those teeth are pretty tiny. They're not really great defense. So Atari's first thing that he's going to do to try to protect himself is hide. And he has this really great thing called camouflage. If you guys have spent any time around a zoo, or if you have any sort of experience learning about this kind of thing, you've probably heard that word before. And if you haven't, camouflage just means that you blend in with your surroundings. So I'm going to get a little closer so you can see his coloring. You can see that Atari's got this wonderful, if he stops moving, you'll be able to see it, green and brown coloration, and that's because he lives in the rainforest where there's lots of green and there's lots of brown. So he does a really great job of blending in or camouflaging with his surroundings. And that's a really, really great way to hide from predators who might try to eat him. Now, not all frogs or other amphibians have that camouflage coloration. You might be thinking like, oh, a poison dart frog is bright green or bright blue, and that's a completely different thing. So they could camouflage on a really bright background, but they're going to use those colors for something else, and I'm going to let Stephanie talk about that. Say bye.
All right, so our next one might be a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to kind of bring her close so you can see her face. This is what's called a tomato frog. So you can see she has some really bright colors. And those bright colors, typically when you see a bright color in nature, it means a warning color. So her bright red color is not going to help her camouflage, but it's going to help her talk to the other animals that are out there in nature with her. So she is going to be found in Madagascar. Her name is Ruby because she is bright red. And with that tomato color, she's called a tomato frog. So these tomato frogs are only found in Madagascar. So they're only found in one place in the world. And that bright red color is a warning color because she is actually able to produce a kind of mucusy secretion all over her skin. So she kind of looks like she has snot all over her skin for those younger kids. So she kind of has all this white foamy stuff on her. And then if something tries to eat her, it's going to clog up their mouth. So she is going to be able to run away and get away or hop away because the predator is going to be kind of trying to get that yucky taste out of their mouth. So with that, she can protect herself. So she has that kind of toxic secretion. So that's going to be kind of like a poison because it's going to be something that someone's going to ingest versus a venom, which is something that if somebody bites something and they inject a poison or a venom into them. That's what venomous is. Versus poisonous, you have to eat it to be poisonous. So these guys here, like I said, are found in Madagascar. So they're only found in one place in the world. But that defense that they have can actually protect themselves from snakes or other types of animals. So they have that great defense of that secretion that she has. So she is mostly going to be aquatic. She is also mostly going to be down in the wet dirt. So she likes to dig really, really far down, which is why I kind of have my hands kind of made into a little burrow for her so that she can kind of burrow. We're going to get her more comfortable. She likes to be hidden, so that's why she's kind of hanging out down there. So I'm going to actually put her in her box so you can see her more close up. And then we'll get one last good look at her if we can see her through the box. So she has, there's her little face. You can see how brightly colored she is, and she has those different colors on her. So she is one of our other amphibian friends. She's actually our last amphibian friend that we're going to be bringing out here. So Jess is going to come back in and review all of our amphibians, and then we'll take some questions from you guys.
Alrighty, so you met some awesome amphibians today. They all had a few things in common. They laid eggs, and they had to lay eggs in water because they don't have an eggshell. They had that really special skin that can take in oxygen and nutrients. That's called a permeable skin, for those of you guys that are curious. And they also go through a metamorphosis in order to become adults. One thing we do want to talk about with our amphibians is that most places in the world have some kind of an amphibian. You might even have them in your backyard. And if you've ever been outside at night and you hear them croaking and they're being really loud, that's actually a great sign because that means you have amphibians in your backyard. So they have that special skin, and I kind of hinted at this earlier. If you've got a really nice, clean waterway for them to live in, a lot of them are going to live there, and you're going to hear all of those amphibians making their calls. However, if there's pollution or there's trash on the side of your pond or something like that, you're not going to have any amphibians. And you're not going to hear those croaks. So that's why amphibians are what we call an indicator species. And if you guys want to learn more about that, please feel free to ask us some questions. Thank you so much for letting us come out to hang out with you today.